Hello everyone! On yesterday's video I got a comment from a gentleman who worked for CIG until 2022. I was always looking for this, but it's hard to find someone who wants to talk about his experience with CIG, and people who are still working for CIG are under NDA. It's also not easy to confirm that someone was really working for CIG. In this case, I am very confident. I want to talk about what he wrote, but first I want to make a few things very clear. I don't want Star Citizen to fail. I want Star Citizen to become a fantastic game and a huge success. However, I have no hope left as long as Chris is making the decisions. Chris still doesn't have any plan, any concept. We have reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks, which are wasting lots of money and time. Chris only cares about eye candy, fluff, time sinks, cool cinematic, and his interactive movie Squadron 42. Chris doesn't care about basics, basic mechanics, some very basic physics, fun and interesting gameplay. Chris is perfect at getting the money in, but Chris is a terrible choice at leading this project. So I'm not hating on Star Citizen. No, I want this game. This game has so much potential. We want both games as promised. Another Wing Commander, Squadron 42, and an MMO, Star Citizen, but Chris puts most of the money and most of the employees exclusively onto Squadron 42. Star Citizen is at $1 billion in funding, which was already achieved in January 2025. Don't just look at the funding tracker on CIG's website. CIG has private investors too, for example the Caldas. According to devs, at least $500 million of those $1 billion went purely into Squadron 42. Yes, some things done for Squadron 42 will roll over to the universe, but not a very expensive actors, not a very expensive cutscenes, etc. And this does not mean that the rest of the money, $500 million, went into the PU, because CIG built a very expensive office building in Manchester with very expensive art. Chris built a very expensive private cinema in his Manchester building, and the Frankfurt building has very expensive art too. Before someone writes, Blizzard and other game studios have very expensive art too, and they have private cinemas as well. Yes, but those companies delivered games that made a lot of money, while CIG in year 13, after $1 billion in funding, has very little to show for. A buggy, laggy tech demo with missing core mechanics, and we are supposed to get Squadron 42 in 2026, something I am not so sure about. Let's take a look at his comment. Robert Pedersen, I'm a former dev at a Frankfurt studio. Why do I believe this is genuine? Because I can click on his name, I can see his YouTube channel, and here's a video with video game lighting examples, games he worked on. Firefighting Simulator, The Squad. Star Citizen, looks familiar, doesn't it? And it's not just a screenshot, there are developer comments like PA Speaker ANN Random 001. Watch Dogs. I'm a former dev at the Frankfurt studio. I can say right now that the buckets of money they spent in the UK studio is about the same that they spent at the Frankfurt studio. CIG has blown millions of backers' money on frivolous bullshit. He's talking about the very expensive art. Yes, we want CIG employees to work in a very nice, clean environment with good colors, good furniture, with a kitchen, cafeteria, etc. But what CIG does went way beyond this. Chris spent millions and millions of dollars just on very expensive art and on his private cinema in Manchester. Oh, and Squadron 42 is worse than an interactive movie with cutscenes. The gameplay itself is during a cutscene where you walk through an environment listening to Mark Hamill have a conversation. He does this about 5 times in a game. So it means at least 5 times the player will be able to move around and look at stuff, but you are tethered to Mark Hamill and are forced to move at his pace, doing nothing but listening to a dialogue between Mark Hamill and another actor. This is exactly what I'm saying for many years by now, and I've feared. Chris doesn't want to make a fun and interesting game. Chris wants to make some kind of boring interactive movie. During internal Squadron 42 presentations, the whole team, several of us, were making side bets as to how much walking and talking the player would have to endure. The walking and talking occurred during 4 internal presentations that I saw, and it was the majority of the overall presentations. There were typically at least 2 walking and talking sections in every presentation, but thankfully not in every one. But I'm guessing several hours of overall gameplay will be with the player doing either nothing or minimal inputs, particularly at any point in a game where you're not flying a ship and are on foot. Squadron 42 will be a beautiful thing to look at, but it will no doubt be one of the worst games that was ever conceived, let alone made. Squadron 42 will never get my money. RN1441 asked, does any of this work even as well as Oblivion NPC AI did back in 26? Robert Peterson replied, I honestly don't know. I know the technical problems that caused them standing on chairs, but I don't know the state of the AI at all. He's talking about NPC AI, not about AI like ChatGPT. Sorry, but I was not in those circles at CIG. I was a level designer for the PU. And I wasn't even allowed to design in-game levels when I was there. The artists did that, and the artists didn't even understand why they were doing that job. Yeah, how many times did I say it's all about art? Chris only cares about eye candy, fluff, time sinks, cool cinematic, and this interactive movie Squadron 42. Gameplay doesn't interest Chris. The lead level designer quit the day after I did, and the entire level design team in Frankfurt was at their wits' end. This was back in 2022. But I think mine and the lead's quitting forced CIG to actually allow the level designers to make game levels and work with the AI. But I quit before that happens, so never got a chance to work with the AI and see what it can do. So yeah, if my quitting forced CIG to focus more on actual gameplay within the game environments, all I can say is, you are welcome. And here I asked him if I can use his comments for a video, and he replied, Camural, it's all good. Typically, I follow my NDAs in my career and rarely give unauthorized insights, but CIG and Chris have really been pissing me off with their shitty efforts. I'm still a game developer working for a different company, and I take pride in my work, as do most people making games. But CIG's practices and methods are frankly embarrassing for the games industry, and it's truly difficult to stay silent in the face of such silly nonsense. Kaiser86 Sosa was asking for legal action. Robert Peterson replied, I don't want legal action or anything terrible to happen to CIG. I want Star Citizen to be finished and released as a cool game. I don't care about Squadron 42, but I definitely want Star Citizen to continue for years. You and me both, Robert Peterson. This is very interesting too. Sevis G wrote, makes sense. Star Citizen developers couldn't make fun gameplay if their family lives depended on it. Thus, we get a movie mostly. Robert Peterson replied, Star Citizen devs are not allowed to make fun gameplay. This is not a joke. Yeah, for how many years I'm saying this by now? Chris doesn't care about fun. Chris doesn't care about gameplay. Chris only cares about cool cinematic. Everything else plays no role for Chris. Thank you very, very much, Robert Peterson, for giving us some insights. It's very hard to find someone who was working for CIG or is still working and wants to talk. What can we as backers do? If the money stops, this project will fail. CIG doesn't have a lot of reserves, and they have to pay back the Caldas sometime in a not so distant future. But I think there's no use in throwing good money after bad money. I stopped buying ships until I see some real progress. In January 2025, we got the first iteration of server meshing, but besides raising player caps, it didn't fix anything. We still have massive lag, massive interaction delays, and massive do-things, even do-things of players moving at player speeds. So my advice for everyone is, stop throwing good money after bad money, stop buying ships until we see real progress. At one point you have to realize if you give Chris more money, he will just spend it on more eye candy, fluff, time sinks, cool cinematic and his interactive movie Squadron 42. Very little of the money will ever be spent on the PU and on fun and interesting gameplay. And don't get your hopes up. Yeah, when Squadron 42 will get released, CIG will put all devs onto the PU. No, because right now CIG is working on Chapter 1 of Squadron 42, but there will be Chapter 2 and 3.
Get used to disappointment.
Thanks for watching. and see you next time. Bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
No.
Hi, I'm Mark Hamill, though starring in Wing Commander. I'm also featured on Mask of the Phantom.
Wow.
Now this can be yours for
Oh,
Troublemaker.
yeah.
Look at that, look at that top.
Look at that.
Where's it?
That's real plastic, too. That is, see, you open, what you do is you open it,
Towards Billy Butler.
you open it, and then you smell the plastic. Oh, that was a good week. Very good week.
Hey, if you got those plastic champagne glasses we asked for,
Oh, dear me.
there you go, Tom.
That's very kind of you. You didn't have to do that. This would be just fine. The way I drink.
Oh, Cliff.
Hey, don't start with me, Bernard. Thank you. That's very nice. Man, if you people weren't in costume.
Chris isn't.
Hey, you're still here. You might want to join me on Twitter or on Blue Sky.